In the last week, there have been some compelling leaks suggesting a port of The Witcher 3 will be coming to the Nintendo Switch later this year. CD Projekt Red's CEO was even asked about it and gave the predictable answer that if they were working on it, we would know, but also that they don't comment on unannounced games. And plenty of other channels have covered this rumor, as I'm sure most people have already seen something about it, but in this video, we will be discussing the sacrifices such a port would have to make to come to Nintendo's hybrid console, and if, in the end, those sacrifices would be worth it. So assuming that this port is indeed coming, let's see how CD Projekt Red would go about getting it running on the Nintendo Switch. The first cut would obviously be resolution. Way back in 2015 when The Witcher 3 released on the Xbox One, using dynamic resolution scaling, it ran between 900p and 1080p. In practice, it spent most of the time running closer to 900p and had frequent frame rate dips even at that lower resolution. To be clear, this was common for ambitious Xbox One games at the time, with PS4 versions getting a 1080p port to the Xbox One's 900p. So to be fair, this wasn't specific to The Witcher 3. All that being said, the original Xbox One is still several times more powerful than the Nintendo Switch, so the baseline drops even further. I believe that there will likely be a ceiling of 720p in docked mode, and probably an average resolution of 600p in portable mode. 540p is really the lowest acceptable resolution on the Switch's screen before it just gets too blurry, so a dynamic resolution jumping between 540p up to a theoretical possible 720p in rare instances, with 600p as the normal targeted resolution would be ideal for portable mode. Still, even with those compromises, there will be other sacrifices that need to be made in certain areas. Novigrad, for example, made the PlayStation 4 drop frames, and it is very CPU intensive with all the NPCs wandering around the city. This is a big area of opportunity for the Switch though, because there could simply be fewer NPCs walking around. One of the few criticisms I had with The Witcher 3 was that most NPCs in the game could not be interacted with. Especially in Novigrad, the NPCs are simply there to make the city feel more alive and lived in. They really serve no other purpose. Calling a few of them here and there to help keep performance high in the Switch version of the game would be an easy sacrifice that many people probably wouldn't even notice. Other areas, such as Crookback Bog, however, are a different story. There are effects in this area that simply brought the PS4 to its knees, so the Switch has no chance to have the same look and feel of the other consoles here. They'll likely need to outright remove some of the atmospheric effects or change what kind of tech they are using altogether. Another issue will be plant and tree density in the overworld. This is also something that can be scaled back while still retaining the look and feel of the world, and most people only notice the difference when comparing scenes side by side. The Switch version of Skyrim, for example, pared back some of the foliage from the other versions of the special edition, and you'd only really be able to tell when doing a direct comparison. Other missing features like volumetric god rays are again only noticeable to that small subset of gamers who are technically literate when it comes to these things. The average gamer wouldn't likely notice the difference at all. There is one thing we haven't discussed, however, and it is likely to be the biggest obstacle CD Projekt Red will have to overcome, and that is the seamless open world. One of the most immersive parts of The Witcher 3 was the fact that, outside of fast travel, the world was completely seamless. You could travel across the entire map without ever seeing a loading screen, and several quests took advantage of this with long travel sequences from one end of the world to the other. The question is, how will the Switch handle this? Is it even possible? Well, Zelda Breath of the Wild was also another seamless, huge open world game on the Switch, but it is definitely not as graphically intensive as The Witcher 3. That being said, I believe that there was way more going on under the hood for Breath of the Wild compared to The Witcher 3. There is an elaborate physics system that governs basically everything you do in Breath of the Wild, and that is very CPU intensive. As far as I know, there's nothing that taxing going on in The Witcher 3, other than NPCs walking a certain path in a city, and of course, the total number of NPCs on screen, which is a strain on both the CPU and GPU. For comparison's sake, the GPD Win 2 can run The Witcher 3, looking pretty good at 720p at around 25 frames per second. Technically, the GPD Win 2 is a little more powerful than the Switch, but it has to deal with Windows overhead, plus the game isn't optimized at all to run on specs that low. A team dedicated to porting The Witcher 3 has very little OS overhead, plus tools at their disposal to create a bespoke version of the game meant to look and run a specific way on the Switch. Going a step further, Nintendo has recently allowed for a boost mode to be made available to third-party developers. This is part of the way that Mortal Kombat 11 was able to look pretty good and run at a 60 frames per second clip. Allowing access to the boost mode for The Witcher 3 would provide additional headroom for the game to run well. So yeah, there is a pretty good list of compromises that will have to be made to get The Witcher 3 to run well on the Nintendo Switch. In my opinion though, it is more than possible to do and could actually be a showpiece title for the system. The game would sell tremendously well, with the Switch approaching a user base of 40 million, which is far, far more than what the Xbox One had at the time that The Witcher 3 released back in 2015. Zelda Breath of the Wild has sold approximately 13 million copies on the Switch, and Skyrim sold over 1 million copies at full price, so there's definitely a desire for open world games ready to be exploited. Do I believe that this is actually happening though? Well, for this one, I am pretty skeptical. I would love it, but until I see it formally announced, I am assuming that The Witcher 3 on the Switch is nothing more than a rumor. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe, maybe click that bell icon, and as always, thank you so much for watching.